Hey dudes, it's SilviteSoltis, back with another WoW Classic video. Over the past 5 years, we've all had a lot of fun in the Classic community. Vanilla, TBC, and Wrath have come and gone, and Cataclysm and Season of Discovery are still offering fun to many players around the world. That said, no king rules forever, and the hype around Classic has definitely died down a lot since the epically hyped adventure that we set out on back in 2019. Despite this, there seems to be a lot of buzz in the community recently. Something in the air, or maybe in the morning glory dew, causing a stir in those who greatly enjoyed and long for the good old days and how WoW used to be, but with more. The culprit, of course, is the idea of Classic Plus. Now, I know that everybody and their mother is talking about Classic Plus, and has been for years at this point, but with recent interviews with devs hinting at it, hardcore guilds postponing fresh runs, and the wild ride in popularity that Season of Discovery brought with its changes, it seems that there really might be something in the works over at Blizzard. So today, I wanted to discuss a few of my own thoughts about Classic Plus, what they should include, what they should avoid, and what might be interesting ideas to consider. And while this is totally my own thoughts and opinions, I'd like to open up the discussion to you all as well. So leave a comment down below to let me know what you think should or shouldn't be included in Classic Plus. Oh, and while you're at it, subscribe to see more. But yeah, let's get right into it. There's no doubt that Classic Plus will be a big project if Blizzard is taking it seriously. The same old formula that worked so well in the mid-2000s and 2019 isn't likely to bring everyone home, and Blizzard definitely knows this. That said, they need to strike a balance to make sure that they keep the feel of Classic there. This is where I think they messed up big with Season of Discovery, and why I didn't really get too into it the few times that I did play. The Classic gameplay just wasn't really there, especially after we all got used to things at level 25 in Phase 1. So, that said, what should Classic Plus bring to the table? First and foremost, there need to be at least 2 new playable races that already exist in Classic content. Ogres or Goblins for the Horde, and High Elves for the Alliance make the most sense, but others could maybe be considered as well. By simply adding in a few new playable races, players can experience the game from a new perspective, even if it is almost entirely cosmetic. And a breath of fresh air can be blown in right from the get-go. Plus, who wouldn't love to play a big old tubby ogre? Besides new races though, it would also be great to see the zones that were originally planned for vanilla, but eventually scrapped. Places like Hyjal, Oldham, and the Emerald Dream would be great additions to the game. New questing hubs for gold making, or reputations in these zones, can provide more much-needed open-world content for players at level cap. And I just think it would be really cool to visit these zones in a Classic WoW setting. Ideally, these wouldn't be in right away, instead added in patches as a way to keep players engaged after reaching level 60 and finishing what is normally on offer in Classic. After all, the Classic leveling journey is its own experience, and I think that should stay mostly the way it is. Bonus zones added periodically to the end, in my opinion, just add something more to keep veteran players engaged in that sense of discovery that we all know and love. Another great thing I'd like to see added would be some new dungeons and raids. This is one thing that I think SOD did fairly well in its version of Blackfather Deeps, but really, I think keeping existing dungeons and raids the same while adding new ones with a similar Classic level of difficulty would be the way to go. Furthermore, these dungeons and raids should be locked behind some sort of simple attunement process, like obtaining the key for Skullments, or the quest to zone into Molten Core or Blackening Lair. These sort of quests give players additional goals that really add to the sense of progression that we all crave. Every small step, finding a particular mob, looting an item to start a quest, or clearing a certain part of a dungeon, brings you closer to zoning in. You already feel accomplished by just being able to zone in, and then you still have the whole dungeon or raid experience to enjoy. Honestly, it's something that I think they just have to include. Finally, it's time to include dual spec in Classic. Though this would definitely be a big change from original vanilla, it's a quality of life change that would just make it so much easier to keep players from burning out. so many raiders had to drop hundreds of gold every week to swap between different specs, and it led to an insane need to grind gold that, quite frankly, didn't exist in original vanilla. If Classic Plus were to have dual spec, I imagine it would be a reward for completing a long and interesting quest chain, not just something you pay a few thousand gold for at any class trainer. Again, Classic is all about the journey and setting goals, so having the option to work towards such a useful reward would be a great thing for the game. It could be a new class quest, a dungeon chain, or even a reward for completing objectives in one or more new zones. But I think it has to be included in some way. It's just too useful in Classic to not consider having. So, those are the 4 things that I 100% think need to be included. But there are still a few things that I'd also be open to. Firstly, it might be a good idea for Blizzard to consider some minor buffs to hybrid specs, as well as minor nerfs to warriors and rogues, to try and gain some sense of balance in raiding. That said, this would have to be done with surgical precision, so as to not ruin the Classic experience for those who enjoy it, and really might not really be worth it in the long run. Still, with how overpowered warriors and rogues are in Classic, it's something that I think is worth considering at least. In addition to some minor buffs and nerfs, I think it would also be interesting if Blizzard kept some of the SOD changes to paladins, shamans, and druids to keep them as viable tanks in a Classic Plus. As we all know, tanks are constantly in short supply, and having a few more classes that could perform this role would be super beneficial. That said, I don't think that they should go as far as Season of Discovery did by any means, with a ridiculous number of runes and new abilities. Just some minor additions like a taunt for paladins, maybe an armor buff for shamans, and some additional AoE for druid tanks. Just stuff that makes them a little bit more comparable to warrior tanks in dungeons and raids. As we know, Season of Discovery saw several classes gain tanking roles to address this issue, and overall it seems it went quite well. However, I really think it only makes sense for the original tanking classes from vanilla to actually have tanking capabilities. And while shamans weren't actually tanks, I think it would just be good for the Alliance Horde balance to give them the same option as their paladin counterparts. But if it seems like it would be a nightmare to balance, I can totally understand why Blizzard would be hesitant to make this change in Classic Plus. Speaking of balance though, I also think it would be cool to see a new class enter the game as well. My personal favorite would be the Battle Mage, which could be a tank or a magic-based melee DPS. But things like a Tinker or a Necromancer would be neat too. Again, this would have to be done with surgical precision, so as to not upset the delicate balance like the introductions of Death Knights did back in Wrath of the Lich King. But if Blizzard did decide to add a new class in Classic Plus, I think it would be a great way to keep players engaged in the content, especially if it's added later on. Finally, I think that professions, while a staple of Classic as they are, could use a bit of improvement. Actually, I think that the systems are fine as they are, if I'm being honest, but new zones and dungeons could introduce new recipes for unique and interesting items. These could be locked behind long and epic quest chains and with new content, or even sprinkled throughout the existing world in some way. That said, I think that Blizzard needs to be very careful about the power of these items, making sure that they are in line with existing items in gear. If they're anywhere near as powerful as items added in the Season of Discovery professions, it'll be completely detrimental to the Classic experience. And really, that's what Classic Plus is all about, adding on to Classic. So, we've discussed what I think Classic Plus should include, and what changes or additions might be a good idea to consider. But what should Blizzard be careful to avoid entirely? First off, runes. In Season of Discovery, there are many powerful runes to collect for our characters. And while at first it was cool to run around and try to collect them all, it seems that they went well beyond the number that made sense, completely changing class identities and playstyles in the process. In Classic, our characters have historically had their unique roles and identities, and it seems, at least to me, that adding all these new spells and abilities just makes it more like retail than Classic. And while I do think that some minor changes can be considered to help balance out the number of each class and increase the number of tanks, I don't think hundreds of runes are the way to go about it in the Classic Plus. Next up, dailies and weeklies. I might be in the minority here, But in my opinion, daily and weekly quests should be avoided at all costs in Classic Plus, particularly those hubs players use to farm gold and reputation. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved logging in and having something to do, and I actually fully enjoyed running the dailies in the Burning Crusade and Wrath. But for Classic, I feel like the grind associated with farming gold and improving reputation without an easy daily hub is just the right way to do it. If players have the easy option of just repeating a quest over and over, they'll use it to optimize their farming. And yes, while running Dire Maul 1,000 times per week to kill Lashers might be comparable, at least it's in the spirit of Classic. Of course, it wouldn't be Classic without a long leveling journey, and I think that's something that Blizzard needs to consider as well. If Classic Plus is to be successful, I believe that there shouldn't be any boost to leveling. No XP buffs, or nightmare incursions for quickly catching up on levels, nothing. Assuming Classic Plus is a long-term commitment and not a seasonal server like Season of Mastery or Discovery, players should feel the need to commit and make the grind to reach endgame, then see whatever the new endgame content it has to offer. Finally, boosting and GDKPs. These two gameplay styles crept into Classic quite early on, and as I'm sure everyone has noticed, they completely degrade the experience. Even though they are player-driven to a large extent, they're toxic to Classic, and WoW in general. And Blizzard really needs to make sure to crack down on it if we are to have any semblance of a Classic experience. Oh, and no WoW token either, obviously. So, given all that, where do I stand on Classic Plus? Would I even play it? Well, considering how much Classic has morphed into retail over the past few years, I'm a bit torn. On one hand, I would love to have that experience of discovering new and unknown things out in the open world like I did back in the day, in the lands of Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms. But on the other hand, I'm not sure how seriously Blizzard is considering particular changes. I think, given how busy I currently am in my career and home life, I would probably sit it out for a while, to see how the launch goes and what sort of things even get announced before I actually jump in. But given my history with the game, I'm sure that I'd eventually cave and jump back in. After all, WoW has a way of bringing us all back eventually, and I know that I've come back for a lot less when I had the time. That said, what do you all think? What things would you like to see in Classic Plus? And what do you think needs to be avoided? Let me know by leaving a comment down below. But anyway, that's it for today. Thanks so much for watching and or listening in. If you'd like to see more in the future, hit the subscribe button and click on the bell for notifications. But for now, and as always, take it easy guys, and see you in Classic Plus.